Okay, well, that's me done on the food front. I'm glad, man.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I've taken as you said, about 2 hours to set up this, but this is my first podcast I'd call a podcast.
Cool.
I've had people sat here before, but
It's the first time it's materialised into.
yeah, it's the first time someone brought their own mic.
Yeah.
I've been doing it with
It's
them holding their phone by their mouth.
it's a token of goodwill.
We three muggos, glory and
For thy podcast, Frankincense, Myrrh, and Audio Technica 2020.
The kind of things I want to cover on podcasts though is like favorite films, and then contemporary films, and those kind of topics, and then where we think industry stuff's going for film and music. Which is pretty full on.
Yeah. No, it is.
But
then I think because nowadays the what was strictly like an industrial realm is so tied in with popular culture, you know. So everyone has an opinion on the Oscars, which is it's a very industrial thing, and then everyone has has a comprehension, not just an opinion about, say, Spotify and what that's doing to the music industry, and podcasting, and alternative media like YouTube and all the effects. That's part of the conversation now. So with that being the case, I think it's easier to sort of weave in and out of them in a shorthand sort of sense, and yeah, it's cool.
We've out in and out the two industries,
or no, just the two areas. From sort of like talking about a film, and then sort of the industry that it's placed within, say, and the audience reception, and then with that is like a more. I'm sure we're going to go into quite sociological sort of themes.
Yeah,
and I think that's all sort of facilitated by how a lot of those what used to be sort of distinctions and now sort of muddied, and they sort of intersect, which is, in that sense it's cool.
Muddied.
Yeah. They were, they were very sort of separate. They were,
It's interesting you said that. I'm sure we'll go into that kind of thing. I think that's funny because when you talking about psychological and sociological things, because it's like I'm not looking to be like, well, the critiques thought this, and I'm inclined to agree.
Right.
Because there's I forgot who said the quote, but it's this idea that the artist informs the critic, and the critic informs the masses.
Yeah.
So that insinuates there should be a kind of an educating on both sides, and the critic is supposed to say, the artist says, "This is art," and then the critic says, "That is shit." No, the critic says, "People, don't you see what this is?" And then that bridge is supposed to be helping overcome the gap between the kind of shamanic out there artists exploring the unknown, the void, and their own dreamscape or their ideas about the world. And then it should take people being brave enough to say what they like, not just what they don't like. A critic doesn't just critique. And if it does,
they frame.
They frame, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that's interesting. Do you think there's more of a utility to that nowadays, or has it adapted, or because some people would believe, with the ability for people to sort of come together based on certain interests or opinions through the internet and otherwise, that we need less of that sort of leading or framing from a certain sort of critical establishment or an artistic establishment.
Well, the critical establishments, is that what people go on, or do they just go on an average from Red Tomatoes and IMDb, or Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb?
That's what I'm saying.
So
yeah.
when they do that, you say it's coming together, but you're talking about averages of averages, and so you get people who the main thing that a Rotten Tomatoes critical response or rating would be today, I think, is like one that says, what is this film relative to its advert and what I wanted out of it, not how good is the film.
Right.
So
well, yeah, no, well that's very real, that's concrete, because recently I just saw a Wired article, and they said that Red Tomatoes is finding out ways to deal with the fact that there's a sort of staggering amount of ratings before that sort of number of people could even see the film. You know?
yeah,
and obviously because of the way Rotten Tomatoes system works, that is just logged as, you know, genuine ratings and opinions. But you know, it's that's, you know,
it's also the kind of person that's going to do it. I mean, if you look at something like travel lodges,
yeah,
you're going to get generally good responses, or you're going to get a negative one, and that and then the average out is average.
Right.
Because so it might have 3-star, but maybe no one's given them 3-star. They've had people give them nothing because they thought they was terrible, because they've been but they're the people that over dramatized and bothering to post. They're bothering to say, you like, this is, you know.
Yeah, and so in that stage of the day, so when, you know, before the early sort of release or even pre-release, where sort of you know, space and time where people are going up and putting in these ratings when they haven't even seen the film, I don't think they're, you know, you can't even give a nuanced sort of middle of the road rating.
But who's people putting up responses before seeing it?
Right. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's happening with Captain Marvel, which we're going to talk about later, and of course it's kind of politically motivated. I think I don't know. This is the thing, I call it Black Panther syndrome, because the reason why it's in the papers, or it's been reported on now, is because people are doing it in as a sort of, you know, response to feminism, right? Or what they see as feminism being sort of lauded around in that movie, and that's true. But it happened with Black Panther. I mean, that film had 100% like way too quick, you know, and no one really reported on it then, because, you know, it kind of fitted with a narrative that that was popular at that time, that you know, Black Panther is this you know, bar lifting film that signifies this, that and the other. So yeah, it's real, and it happens, you know, for many different reasons, but I think they're reporting on this because specific to what Captain Marvel is and what that signifies.
Well, like, I remember really I often really identify with films,
Sure.
And I'm like, bam, like this is for me. And one of them was the Zac Efron DJ movie. Have you seen that?
Oh, We Are Friends.
We Are Your Friends, or We Are Your. I think it's Your.
We
friends.
Are your friends. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the song We Are
Oh, your friends. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Never be alone again.
Right.
And
Right.
when that came out, you had some drug trips happened in the film. You have them taking ecstasy within it. You have him kind of discovering his relationship with music, and kind of looking to empathize with a whole generation, and then dealing with mortality in the film as four young guys that have to rely on themselves, and there's a kind of a brave stepping up to do that. And so I see a film like that, and I'm like, a lot of people wouldn't bat an eyelid, and they'd be like, I don't think he's even a very good DJ, and I just think he's like, why is he so attractive?
Well,
like, why don't you just go back to High School Musical? And I'm saying, well, you're basing your identity on a negative, not on a positive. You see it as a film, and then they say, I am going to utilize this film as a basis of one-upmanship with culture, so I can say I'm better than that, and that serves them on that level. But I identified with it, so I understand when people saw something like. Huh?
It serves the individual.
How it serves individuals watching the film didn't speak to everyone, because a lot of people hadn't had experiences like that they were ruminating on or wanting to see expressed in the outer world. Whereas I felt like I had this whole narrative of things that I understood to be part of my reality that I hadn't seen outside of my own sphere, and then to see it happening in California with someone writing a film with Zac Efron starring was really cool. So I understand where someone can watch something like Black Panther and be like, well, I identify highly, and this is really how I feel. Right.
I think that's a good lead into Get Out, because that film came out in 2016, and we were already well into the era of trailers that pretty much reveal the whole film, from beat to beat, narrative strain to narrative strain in a very linear sense. So when you have a film like Get Out that has such a political and sociological subtext, people see that entire narrative that they're putting forward in its entirety, and it's very hard to say, well, you can't make a judgment of that, because if you look at that and you watch the film afterwards, what disparity really was there? It wasn't much. So that has to be factored in when we're talking about this practice of premature ratings or ideologically driven rating of films.
Why? Well, if they haven't seen the film, they can't rate the film.
Yeah, no.
That's it. That's the line.
Yeah, no. But you can understand how. I'm not saying it's
okay, so we can understand how culture's got where it is, where we're rating films before we've seen them.
Someone can see the whole narrative of Get Out and then have an opinion either way. You know what I mean? That does match that of the film. That they would get from watching the film.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the critique of film is because it's based on identity. But it's based on you saying something as yourself in relation to something else.
Right.
It's not coming from the other thing. There's no. If you watch Hook with Robin Williams, even though it asks you to empathise with the quintessential spirit of Peter Pan, you never embody him and go, wasn't it just fantastic being in Neverland, right? You're like, yeah, it's a great good kids movie. Right. And people aren't going to become a different person as much as the film can make you feel different for those moments. I think they say in it something along the lines of, in those moments between sleeping or dreaming and when you're awake, that's when I'll know you. And it's kind of like that's how the film relates to them as well. You have a little Julia Roberts character saying, you'll relate to me in silence. You're not going to, some people are proud enough to say, this is a part of my identity. I'm going to say, yeah, I do like this film. But that doesn't happen a lot because we think we're too intelligent to be loving.
Well, this is the thing with a film like Get Out, and this from my perspective is, it was very hard with that film to be like, oh, it's a great horror film, because it was so, everything was orbited around, certain sort of ideological tenets.
Yeah, I didn't watch it thinking, I know why I like this. I watched it thinking, I know what they're asking me to think and what they're asking me to think about and how they're asking me to look at things. And by the way, that sentence insinuated that how did I put it? I knew something like knowing why I liked it. When I first watched it, I was a bit beside myself that everyone was just digesting it like popcorn. I found it quite distressing to watch. I was quite alone on that for quite a while.
Can you unpack that? How was it distressing? In what sense?
Well, my brother does kickboxing and boxing, and my mum's and he does hypnotherapy as well. And my mum naturally gives a lot of health advice, and offers and like educates people. My dad makes small talk that others would tend to avoid, and my sister's kind of OCD, and so you're looking at.
By the way, no, let's get back to the Solly family, but yeah, it's like you went all in on that burnout there. Every single from member to member. You only left out Mary, that's fair enough. That's good at least.
Well, then there's the idea of the help in the house that that just does, they mislay it in the film as sort of slave labor, but our grandmother just does a lot of dishes and she does a lot of washing and she's 90,
right?
Like Tomb Raider shit.
Yeah.
Okay, so the film took stereotypes that are very very relatable in my life, and then made them the source of terror, not horror, like where the film kind of jumps off the cliff and says, well, we take brains out of people and put it in other people.
Right.
But terror in the sense
terror
of
at these archetypes,
terror of these stereotypes.
Yeah.
Say, well, I don't trust this family because.
Yeah.
And if that and that, the reason that was weird for me to watch is because it's thinking, well, it's an interesting film because people like films because of what if. What if I'm a wizard like Harry Potter?
Yeah.
What if I could go back in time and visit my children, visit my parents, but before they meet and improve their lives, looking back to the future?
Right. And
what if anything?
And what if? And we get out. It's what if I'm a maniacal, oppressive, murderer of souls. And that's not.
No, it's what if the white man's evil?
Yeah, but I mean on an individual level, like what am I? What if I am those things that I think the movie is putting forward? And what I just said, the way I just described it, I don't think that's too hyperbolic. I mean, like if we're going to talk about the archetypes put forward in the film and what there is to identify with there, it's pretty sinister. It's pretty insidious, like in a deep and psychological way. So
yeah,
It
also had this fascinating idea of the objectification of the black body, the black, and I thought that was interesting as well. It was the savior of the film is the comedy coming from the friend.
Yeah, the supporting character, right?
He's saving grace of it because you're like, oh, they're poking fun at this.
Yeah.
They're saying like, look, there's a weird idea that people have about each other, but did he do it enough? Was he there enough for it to be a horror and then say that the redeeming character is a comedian?
Right. Well, this is what it was. It was a great input in the film, like experientially when you're actually watching it. But when it comes to actually assessing the film, it annoys me that it was in there because him being in there is how they can say it's satirical, right? So I've experienced when you actually kind of probe people's opinion of this film and its subtext and its insinuations, was that when they find something that they can't really sort of negate or comprehend, they'll just say, well, it's a satire. It's like, no, it's only a satire because
if I went to the sauna,
right,
and there was some Polish people and two black guys from London, an Asian woman, and then a white guy my age. Sure. And I went up and I spoke to the white guy my age and said, it's good to have a white guy around.
Right.
That's totally not appropriate.
Yeah, and it wouldn't sort of class that situation as anything different as what it is. And you saying that as anything different as what it is, right?
As in, I can't get beyond my own limitation if I did that.
Right, and the presence of, the black and Asian, whatever individual, that wouldn't make what you said any less, unacceptable.
No.
Right, that's what I tried to put across.
As in, yeah, if they were all one race, it would be just as unacceptable as if they were all just not my race.
Right.
But what I'm trying to say is that it just separates, regardless of how or why, it's just separating me and isolating me and then making it everyone else's fault, as if it's a shame this sauna's full of people that I've identified to be as people I can't connect with without even bothering.
Right. But then this film was like, oh, but you can connect in a different way because there's this one satirical character. It's like, well, no, because 90% of the film, I'll be fair, I'll say 80% of the film is just the sort of unrelenting sort of it's almost like a schizophrenic voice, you know, of, you know, this is how social interactions work in these scenarios. This is what it's like when you're at a party. This is what it's like when you meet the parents. This is what you like when you meet the brother. This is what you like. This is what it's like when you try to explain things to people. This is what it's like, and on and on and on and on. And then it just got more and more contrived, and I'm just like, this is really not conducive to anything good. And you know, I'll leave that there for now because I'd like to get more into why.
And then the idea of this is a big backdrop for people to go, well, let's start a conversation. And I think that's an interesting backdrop because it's kind of like, oh, you got a C in your essay. You got a C because you started a conversation. You put your hand up in class, you get a C.
Right.
That's kind of where I think of starting conversation.
Right. I put my hand up and then I fucking pull my pants down. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Put my hand up and just farted so that everybody knew that I thought that what we're talking about is bullshit.
Right. And then
that's not contributing.
Yeah. That's another thing we lump off.
I made a really stupid, like hyperbolic reference back to my friend that said, well, you could make a film about black stereotypes, and I'm sure people would really entertain the idea. I said, no.
Is that the friend I'm thinking of?
Yes, I'm sure it is.
Sure, cool.
I said, well, okay, why don't I cast a film with Jonah Hill when he was younger, with Michael Cera, and they go to get alcohol. It's just like Superbad, but they go to get alcohol and they or weed, and they phone up this place, and they end up in a ghetto at the back end of New York. And then turns out that their favourite girls from school have actually gone back with some black guys, and they're all getting gang raped in porn. And it's then a chase of the black dick. And it would be like, well, but Charles, that's just disgusting. I'd be like, well, you're talking about expressing these random, unthought through, innate fears. That's kind of where my head would go.
Right.
I'd go a big black dick, and I'd go at people in the ghetto that I don't understand.
Right.
And that is it would be a racist thing to do.
Any day of the week.
Any day of the week.
Yeah.
But I'm not here to express unconscious stereotypes. Not even stereotypes. I'm not going to call that a stereotype, just so you.
Yeah.
But yeah.
This is the thing. We're not saying that like don't make a film like Get Out. I don't speak for you there, but we're not saying don't make a film like Get Out, but.
No, I'm not saying that either. Get Out it is a conversation. There's a lot to talk about with Get Out, you know. But it's about, could I do that myself as a filmmaker? Go, no, I'd have to approach different. How would I approach it different? Well, this is a conversation I'm having.
Right. And it's what I was trying to say. It's like you can make that film, but don't shy on the conversation. Don't say you're having a conversation where you just don't want to hear. I mean, that's such a central point of everything nowadays, but you know.
Don't say it again. Don't shy on a conversation you don't want to hear.
Yeah, or don't start a conversation that you don't want to see develop and branch out and actually deal with the phenomena. Because I feel like that everything in that film was so sort of dictatorial that there isn't even sort of an avenue for a different perception that they put forward. It's like what's happening.
No, yeah, I literally had friends that took that very literally and said, "Well, Charles, maybe us white people was odd as well but we should, or we, this vague idea of maybe we should be more conscientious when we do engage in small talk and just not think of anybody as other than." I thought, I don't think I do that anyway.
Right.
So what the film's done here is said that in a materialist way, like these things limited to their physicality. If you're white, you're not, you're not a transcendent character that helps me get out of my own horror. Mm-hmm. You're actually you are the thing that lets my horror be real, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And therein lies an idea that there is a cultural backdrop to that, like cop shootings, like history. But the idea of implementing it on when in places where it's not necessarily relevant is interesting because it's a film that has big responsibilities.
Here's the thing. This is the point I wanted to say for later, I guess. But You just so perfectly put me into it. I understand the themes that they're trying to convey with the sunken place. You know, let's go for that allegory right now.
Yeah.
It's this idea of being reduced to just a complete value based on your aesthetic, you know, your skin, and like
It's reductive.
Reductively, like like a perception built on a generalized view of your race, or you know, those black guys, or whatever. And I understand that, and it's a place where the personality is completely taken away from you, like, and that's the imagery, right? He's just sinking back and watching his own life and things happen in front of him, but it's not him they're referring to. I understand that, but the only sort of thing that really puts you in that mind space is this film. You know what I mean? Is this film and the way they've constructed the story, and you know the message of it. The only thing that's made me feel slightly, you know, less of a person, or not less of a person, that's probably a bit too much, but like less individualistic, or less autonomous, or you know, just less free is the kind of thing that movie is fueled on, you know, that, you know, very sort of collectivist, deterministic sort of view of this is how social interactions work when you're this binary or when you're that binary.
Right.
It's not good.
And the main character engaged with that state of mind through smoking, and that was something that he's addicted to it, but it also gave him a means of going away, calming down, having a smoke, and that was interesting as well, because like there's a detachment that he gets from it, but with that detachment comes an apathy and also a decision to opt out, which is thought of as intelligent mostly. I'm opting out. I'm off.
Right.
I'm done. It's a judgment. It is a reduction of those white guys are weird. I'm gonna go have a cigarette. This is stressing me out. I'm gonna go have a cigarette. When you're addicted to things, you justify it because when stress is triggered within you, you go straight to the things that are stress relief, and it then speaks to that on itself speaks to a massive cultural idea of the people that identify with the victim are the people that identify with their addiction as well, which is then interesting, because it's easiest to judge when you've got reasons to opt out and just do your own thing, you know. Right.
And I'm just sitting here trying to think, is that like a plus for the movie? Is that what they intended, or is that the rope to hang them with? Because it's like, I don't.
Well, it depends what it is.
I don't think they know, because from how, this is what I think is interesting, from how you sort of posit it there, it's like you would think like, well, that would not play off as him opting out in a strong way. That would mean like he's extremely victimized, and he's inherently affected to the point of addiction by this. And it's like, let's forget that. Like, I think that's very contrived, but like in terms of symbology. But like let's go with it. And so what does that mean? It's like you're forever going to be you're forever going to be prey when you're around people who don't look like you, and the option is to remove yourself. I mean, the logical like the logical conclusion of that is pretty regressive, you know.
Yeah.
And
when I talk, if I was to go to like a spiritual circle or something, or listen to someone like Teal Swan, who's awesome on YouTube, they talk about this idea of like a cultural purging, and that as time goes on, you have to hear I think Chris Martin talked about it under the fact that Trump got voted in as well. There's like a cultural purging of all voices need to be heard, and we'll go through stages of odd kind of unconscious purgings where basically ideas within the collective unconscious have been highlighted or seen or brought to surface, and then they can get sort of molded back in and integrated once they've been, I suppose, deciphered or thought through by people or understood a little bit better.
Needed out, I think.
Needed out, yeah. Well put, yeah. And this is kind of like this, and it means I think what is interesting about Get Out is that it's not high culture or low culture per se. It did this cool mix of filming something as if it's slightly indie movie. It had a lot of like things that wasn't like blockbuster.
Sure.
But then the way it was appealing to people was from like it was drawing from things that weren't high octane. It wasn't asking you. It didn't ask me to like think about like as a whodunit. It just kind of got me scared and then made me think about stereotypes and things that are kind of
yeah. And it didn't. This is
It worked off a low culture mind.
Right, and I don't think it actually functioned as a horror movie at all, and it didn't put me in the mindset of for instance, we watched A Quiet Place last night, and that's a great kind of like sort of platform to think about to start from, because like how did that make me feel when I was watching it? Like what was my mind going through? And it's like, what happens if they make a noise? Why can they kill it at all? Can they kill any of the monsters? And all of these sort of situational things. And Get Out positively does not put you in that space. Like it's just like, it's like, what does that sentence mean? Like what's between the lines there? And you know, I love subtext, but when in order to kind of to engineer that in a good way, where you have something that's so focused on subtextual elements, the subtext itself has to be something sort of transcendent and that fills the soul with, you know, joy or in intrigue, and not just sort of sadness and isolation and you know, disunity, you know,
yeah,
you know,
as a redemptive quality to it. That, as you're talking there, it's like, well, what it did was worked off of paranoia, and by being able to talk about it like that, you have paranoia as something that we don't idolize. We don't think of it as intelligent. We think of it as an overactive mind that's been diseased, or with dis-ease. And so the idea of seeing it through paranoia is interesting, because you have, I mean, if he was smoking weed, it would have been clever as well. If he was like, no, I need this, and then you have all this shit going on with, as soon as because when he leaves the room and then they start
the smoking break,
and they all watch him, for a smoking break, and they all watch him, and then they take bets and stuff like that. There's like 2 times it does it. The first time really scared me. The second time continued to creep me out, because it's an idea of what happens when you're not there. What happens in the space that you're like? What happens in the unknown?
They're banking on you. They're sort of making claims on you. They're deciding your fate.
Yeah, and so if it's appealing to culture by saying, or to people by saying, I'm highlighting to you what your paranoid mind does with your perceptions of people, then that's interesting.
You know what, man? And it's funny because, I hear exactly what you're saying. And it's funny because I need to go back to your example of like the sort of the racist Jonah Hill movie, like the racist Superbad, right? If you just say you released that film and then you were like afterwards you were like, well, if you actually listen to the message, it'd be like fuck the message. You have
people would say, Charles, I don't care what you think about when you're paranoid.
Right.
Very racist.
You've just had 3 white kids run away from like 3 black guys with their dicks out,
who've raped people and filmed it, and are selling drugs.
Fuck your message. Who cares?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
But it's a comedy.
And that's
I don't give a fuck.
And that's how. Yeah. Oh yeah, but it's satire. I don't give a shit. But that's how I feel about Get Out. It's like I don't care about the message. You know what I mean? It's a pretty fucking lousy horror film. The subtext, they weaved it in good, but the subtext is like being led into like a room with spikes and snakes, you know. Well, go on.
Well, I mean, I know a lot of people, and I do value their opinion when they would be really upset with you saying it's a lousy horror film. But something that makes me agree with the lousiness of it is, I was taken out of the film. I really enjoyed the sunken place stuff, but I was really taken out because they went on a psychological level.
The imagery there, like the cinematography there, I was like, whoa, that's great. That's thick. Like,
and he did have a pain that would be able to take hold of him in a way. It doesn't really need the hypnotherapist. If you have a pain like that that's in there that you haven't dealt with, like that can come out whenever you want. Like,
right.
On the other hand of things, when they went into the materialist concept, which is beyond terror into horror, he takes your brain, he takes the white man's brain and he puts it in your body, and you're then the white man.
Right.
As if that is a level of materiality that it took me out of the film, because I don't believe that we are just our brains, and I didn't realize how much I didn't believe that until I watched the film and thought, I don't understand this at all.
I find that like fucking really insulting. Like, you know, not really, because I don't, like, shit doesn't affect me, but like that's definitely got an insulting ring to it, or it plays off in an insulting way, because it's like, oh, you put in a white brain and then this person speaks like this and and it's all you know. And,
well, loads of things.
You know, I'm having a good day, thank you, and it's like. Oh, but
I was insulted by it because I thought that they believe that I'm part of the mass audience that just soak this up as if, yeah, that would happen. I know they think it's a horror, but they have to. But the suspension of disbelief was gone.
That's the interaction they want. They want you to go like, yeah, that makes sense. That's
what they want.
Yeah, that would probably happen. Yeah.
They want you to go, oh my god, He's taking that person's brain and putting him, and then he's them.
Yeah.
And I didn't buy it. I buy comic books and I read them because I know the framework of it. But I was watching this film that posed as like a real, like, I don't know. If they were making Wrong Turn 3 and it was some hillbilly going, here's my fucking brain, and they put it in, and then this zombie guy comes on like, then I'd believe it, because it's they kind of know what it is.
Yeah. The
ridiculousness of that idea was odd in that frame.
And the hyperbole doesn't drag it even further into the narrative, which is the thing with this film. It's like the more hyperbolic they get, or maybe they're not even aware they are getting more hyperbolic, but the more they do, the more the narrative like gets stronger and more prevalent. But like, I'm also annoyed by that whole brain switching thing, because that's the only bit of the movie that I wanted to see sort of expanded. Is like, you know, when he's in the room and he's watching the presentation video.
Yeah.
On the old 70s or 80s VHS sort of TV sort of stuff. I thought that was great, and I was like, this is the world I want to know about. Like, who is this? Like, who are these like fucked up family? Like, how did they begin? Like, what is their like, what's their actual like ethos and what's their goal? And just none of that. It just completely glazed over, and I was like, ugh.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, I often find in a film, I'm teased on the bit that is the substance.
Right.
It's like foreplay when really that was supposed to be the sex.
A good example of that was Solo, and it's like they have him like in this like war-torn area, and they're like 3 years later, and it's like, what the fuck he's been doing for the last 3 years? You know what I mean? Like when he's with the Empire and, you know, fighting wars and getting into sort of scraps with officers and shit like that. That's, you know, I want to see some of that, you know.
As a Star Wars fan, you'd want to see.
Yeah, right, because that's it's mythos, it's lore, you know.
I watched that film and I thought, he's been in the army for 3 years. Like, he's done something safe, and now he was already kind of a disillusioned person, but now he's a disenfranchised person. Like, he doesn't even believe in the army. And it was like this quite quick jump to, well, I know what being in the army for 3 years could do to someone. And that was just what it did.
Yeah, no, I understand. It wouldn't change. It wouldn't change anything about the course.
Because if you said, man, I wanted to move up and I can't move up, and then he said, well, you've been here 2 months. Well, that guy's a dickhead.
Yeah, right.
But he's been there 3 years. It's like he put in the effort and he's trying his best.
Yeah, no, it wouldn't change the course of his character development. That's what I'm saying. But it's such an integral part of Han Solo. His disillusionment is. His disillusionment is so a part of him that it would be cool to see how it actually grew. You know?
The Star Wars universe is a dangerous one for me because I think I could poke at everything and go,
right,
I want to see more of that. Please show me more. A little bit more of that. Thank you. I could do with everything.
Yeah.
I love it.
But but then again, I'm not really talking about what's in the film. I'm talking about what's not in the film. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But yeah, I get what you mean. So that's a part of Get Out that I just thought was like, I can't believe you blanked on that. I can't believe you're shooting blanks on that. That is like the most intriguing thing in this whole movie for me. You know, like who is his family? You know, what are their intentions? If I don't know if it's in this situation, if it's like budget constraints, but I think it would be cool if you had him go to like the heart of a network where these people were doing these things, and and sort of like go straight to the top, sort of vibe, but it just didn't explore where it needed to explore, in my view.
I think, that's interesting. The subjectivity of the character is something that I thought was interesting with regards to look up, because I know people like him, and the silence and the detachment is deemed as intelligent. That's why they do it. I have this idea. It's not mine. But
Please.
You know what I mean. I have beliefs.
Disclaimer.
But I have some friends that this is the idea. Some friends will be able to see a room of 10 people, and they'll stay quiet and seem respectable, not really get to know any of those characters in the room. Mm-hmm. And so they have in their hand potentially 10 friends. I have other friends who go a completely different route. They'll see 10 people in the room. They'll be themselves charismatically, open-endedly, courageously and shamelessly, and they'll make 5 friends definite, and they'll make 5 not friends definite. And I often find myself taking that approach. Generally a blend of the two is great. The ideal would be you have 10 potential friends and 5 definite friends.
Right. It's so you're remaining proactive, yet you're not diluting any sense of who you are. Right.
If you continue with the potential friends, what are they? Potential clients? Are they potential employers? Does it really matter? They're just potential for you at this point.
Right, yeah.
And you've also not connected with anyone or been yourself the whole time. Even if yourself is this idea of keeping things open and being respectable, regardless of how much character or input or energy or zeal or love you give to the surrounding environment. Or contribution would be my idea. That's what I want. If I'm in a room and everyone's acting like dead weight, fuck them. Like, there's no contribution. It's lifeless. It's dull. I don't want to be there. The way this chimes into the film is the main character was that potential guy. Didn't really give much conversation. He kind of just happily dismisses a lot of their conversations and shuts them down because he has this preconception that they're odd, and the idea in this instance is that it's real because that his preconceptions that they are weird and odd are there is interesting because it poses the idea in the film, am I supposed to associate with the intelligence of the main character like you generally do in films, or am I supposed to understand him as a character subject to his own limitations and judge him accordingly, that he's just a part of a horror?
Right. I think with this it's like with them, I think it was afterthought bordering on intention, because if you look at it this way, that essentially what that film is they're taking him as like a piece of meat and just throwing it to the lions and just viewers, behold what happens next, you know. And I think that kind of fits in allegorically and literally, because obviously there's that theme of, you know, his body being harvested and whatnot. So I think when that is the setup you're trying to achieve, let's say they were trying to achieve it, and that was the setup you're trying to achieve, you don't really want to. You don't want to hear him protest. You don't want to hear him sort of really effectively fight back in a way that stops it being a feasting session. So if I'm just say I'm going to a cockfight in China, I don't want to
cockerels and chickens, right?
Right, yeah. Another disclaimer. I don't want to see the two cocks sort of strut off, arm in arm.
Yeah, you do.
You know,
no, I'm joking. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, you want to see the fight.
Right. And so if that's what I want to see, I'm not gonna, or if that's what I want people to see, I'm not gonna integrate that.
So it's interesting with this regarding the film, because I started this podcast saying critique isn't a critic isn't just about being critical or critiquing, and it's true. I think we have said positive things about the film as well.
I just want to...
I think there's a large. I think there's an elephant in the room that has to be
right.
Has to be,
because this is the thing. Because I feel like we're being dragged into quote unquote the sociological. I am gonna have to talk like this. You know what I mean? And it's not necessarily because I want to. I mean, that is the arena.
These are the conversations you've posed. These are the questions you've posed. We need to answer them. Yeah,
right.
We need to talk about them.
Right. But let me just round this off by saying, in terms of cinematography, I think it's an amazing film. I think in terms of that was Jordan Peele's first directorial debut.
That was a debut, yeah.
I think it's a great directorial debut in terms of setup. I think it's good,
and he's found a clever audience straight away.
Right. And
yeah,
and I think you can't sort of disregard marketing in this sense. I mean, I'd call it like making a splash.
Right. He's just gone in a puddle and jumped about, and it's clever.
What a splash it was, right? And I think that's great. And also I respect who's the name of the main actor?
I'm not good with names. I'm probably going to edit in his name.
Right.
His name is
Michael. So the lead character, I respect in light of everything we said, I respect the task he had to sort of execute, and I think he had to sort of take this kind of lifeless and contrived concept and just give it any sort of breadth. And I can see him really putting effort into that, or doing that to a point, especially in some of the scenes where he's interacting with the girlfriend. It's he's doing his best to make this kind of come off as sort of believable, feasible. I think he did some of that well.
Yeah, I think back to those ideas of that intelligent, better than state.
Right.
The film did go a long way to make that his, I don't know if it's hubris or hamasha, his negative character trait for the tragedy of his arc to happen, whereby he keeps thinking he's better than his own paranoia. He's better than something.
Right.
And he's not.
Right. Then I loved this. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because the bits I really enjoyed as well was him grappling with his mother who was in the car accident. That's another area I thought man, like put 50 minutes in the beginning of the film to where the notes start a bit more, because it makes the experience more personal, and that's what you were kind of talking about earlier. There was a distinct lack of any vessel for anything personal in the film.
And so if they did that, this is an interesting idea, because there's pros and cons.
Right.
So if they did that, then the mother becomes somebody that's making him deal with the pain that was already there. So she's actually a helpful thing.
Right.
But because he's the guy, he's not himself. He's the guy that smokes away ideas of his mum, pretends that he doesn't hold these stereotypical views about people, and tries to like act above his own intuitions.
Sure. Act above his own station.
No,
they'll take on a whole new tone. No, sorry, continue.
And it would mean that, so she's no, but the way they've done it presently is that there's a dark insidiousness about her being able to pull a darkness out of him from nothing, to say, if you round me, I'm gonna deal with your shit.
But like, yeah, he's left the film with Pegasus. You know what I mean?
I elaborate.
So he's left the film with a vehicle to like take him to the stars. You know what I mean? Like, he can get on this thing, because when it came to the end of the film, I don't understand. Maybe people don't necessarily have to grow in horror films, but since it has such a personal sort of psychological and sociological narrative to it, you want to see like an arc and growth of the character, right? I don't understand what the character was left with when he kind of got into that cop car with the buddy and then drove off.
He dealt with his issue directly.
Right, but if they embellish that more, then it would be a sense of like you said, through this sort of negative interaction with the girlfriend's mum and how traumatic that was, and all the rest of it. At least he's come out with that, with like, well, now I'm Theseus. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he came out of it saying, yeah, why did I knew I shouldn't have dated that white girl.
Right. Yeah, and
then it just falls back into comedy.
Right. And yeah, and
he doesn't even say the line. His friend says it.
Yeah,
I told you. I told you.
Did they say the line?
She said, I knew you shouldn't have dated that white girl. I'm pretty sure he says that.
Oh wow,
Something along those lines.
I thought you were sort of like boiling it down, but if they actually put that line in there, like, yeah, I mean that is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of his character, he's pacifying everything.
Right.
Trying to make sure no one has a fight. No, I'm not going to deal with conflict. And then he does.
Right.
So it's kind of like
the
film.
Best thing in the movie.
Which is the best part of the movie.
You're right.
It's like Apocalypse Now, and so his character then becomes something that you're aware that he's lacking on some front, and you're waiting for him to be that sort of reddened, manifested person.
Sure.
I say reddened. I talked to Marco about this idea of it's like a concept in alchemy and kind of hermetic, like I suppose religious cults, where this idea that there's 4 parts of a process to boiling down or purifying things or creating, as alchemical enthusiasts and scientists would call like they call it alchemy, but it's about purification and transformation. And so it's kind of half metaphor, half religion, half spiritual, half like part literal.
Just a good indicator of where people are in their arc. That's how I sort of see it.
Yeah, and you had these four parts of the process: a blackening, which is kind of like when you boil all the elements down into soot, which is like a disillusioning, and then you have a whitening, which is like the smoke rising, or the elements turning into gas, or kind of finding the purified element. And then the yellowing, as it kind of something ages, like a cream turning to cheese, and then a reddening, which is like the color of like raw flesh or blood. So it's the enlivened state. It's no longer a pursuit of an idea. It's the thing that takes life by the balls or horns and just and goes for it. It's when you've gone on your journey, you've been disillusioned with your idea of what it's like to be a child. you've seen the ideal of your new adult life that you're striving towards. You then strive towards it and go through the trials and tribulations, and then once you're that vision of yourself, you're then reddened. That's the kind of the idea there. And yeah, him killing them, because he's not interestingly, he's not only killing them, he's killing a material, an idea of materiality to which he's bound, whereby people think that you can take his body, and his body's going to be utilized by a greater system than him, and they're going to take somebody else's brain and put their brain in power, as if he can't use, because at the moment throughout the film he's not been using his intuitions, he's been denying them, so he suddenly has to use his own brain, because or else it's going to be replaced by someone else's.
To free him from the quote unquote shackles that that hold him down into one.
So as a dream sequence, it's really interesting, and it's a dream sequence dealing with a lot of stuff quite heavy-handedly or big-footedly. So that's why it's an interesting thing.
I just love how it's just like, you know, after the rest of the drudgery, it's like ding 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 ding, showdown, and then just straight in with the fucking what was it, the moose antlers or whatever, like impaling the guy, and I was like, right, you know, we're here, and is that horror movie? No, it's not a horror movie, but it's closer to the
It's a slasher, really.
It's a slasher, and it's closer to the horror sort of bracket than anything else in that film, really. So yeah, I mean, but previous to that, it's like what was it, like a sociological thriller, a psychological thriller?
Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, which is you know, I don't have anything against that genre, but like, it really has to know what it is and fulfill that, and not be like this kind of space in between. This thing, I feel like Get Out couldn't be honest about what it is. It couldn't be honest about the fact that it's not really a satire.
That's what I don't like, is the dishonesty, because I actually like things transcending genres.
Right.
I actually wouldn't want to be like, okay, guys, listen, are you a gangster film or a crime film? Come on. Are you a fantasy, or are you an adventure, or are you a sci-fi? Come on. I'd never do that, because I actually like the genre bending. And that's what makes up my annoyance with this film, because like, I don't like being put into the space where it's like, it's not really a horror film, is it? It's more of you're making me do this.
Yeah, it's like, you're making me do this. You know what I mean? Like, it's the same with the stuff with the with the sunken places. Like, yeah, I understand the allegory. It's about a place where you're removed from your own sort of autonomy and understanding, you know, reception as like an individual, perceptions as an individual. But it's like, you're doing this to me right now in the film. You know what I mean?
Right.
You know, you're the one that's removing any notions of like divine individuality and creativity. You're the one doing it. You know what I mean? Not these
that's
characters in the film.
What concerned me about the film is, are they drawing off of something inside of me? Is that what they're trying to do, or are they trying to just let me see what this person, as a director, writer, or whatever, thinks?
Right.
If they're trying to draw it out of me, then I'm offended, because I'm saying I don't associate with this dialogue.
He's trying to hack into a hive mind, and that's scary.
Which is about, was it criticality? But the villain in it is something to do with a hive mind, isn't it? It's about like it's like an insect based.
Talking about the grandfather.
The brand for the mind transformation thing of taking a mind and put it in an eternal
the name
life.
of it.
Yeah,
I think it's something in that realm.
It was definitely insect based anyway.
Yeah. But
sorry, yeah.
So what was I saying?
You're talking about hive minds.
Right, and it's like, well, this like, he tried to get into a hive mind, and it's kind of saddening to say this, but it seems like he was pretty successful in it. In hacking into
the idea that it didn't deal with it. Like, I can appreciate the film psychologically as a talk about as like a dreamscape, but as soon as you go sociologically and we're talking about identity politics, right. I then think it's a heavy-footed film. Right. That there's no real. It's vacuous as well, because I can't talk about some of these things in public, like without being contentious.
Right, and it's annoying, because anything you do is petty. It's like, I don't have a problem with talking about identity politics. I mean, they bore me, but I think we need to have a conversation around them.
Yeah, sure.
But again, this is the sort of trickery and illusory nature of the film. It's like, well, it's not really about identity politics, and if you talk about it through identity politics, and it's like, can we just be honest? It's not a problem, because we need sociological commentaries and stuff sometimes, but can we just be honest about it, you know? And that's what I have to say about Get Out.
Yeah,
you know, this is, you know, I don't think we can. I don't think the identically driven mind, or the identity politic driven mind has really gotten to the point where they feel like they can be out and out in their sort of convictions, and thank God for that.
Yeah,
you know.
Well, I mean, on that front with that film there, you said, you talked about kind of being nitpicky, and you brought me here as the film brought me here. I don't want to be having to discuss these things.
Well, I'm not here. I'm not here until the film brought me here.
Sure. Right. Yeah. Well, with me, I find there's a natural conversations that happen after films, a sort of metaxy, i.e., between the points of conversation. So you're having a dialogue with two people. If one person says, "Oh, that film was really good," the other one says, "You think?" That sometimes they both go, "Yeah, I agree." And they just kind of have a nice circle jerk. Other times, the idea of one person saying they like it, the other person's much more inclined to dislike it. And because I found everybody just going, "Wow, that was amazing," I was inclined to go, this isn't a fair conversation. There is quite a lot of things that need to be discussed here, and the idea that I'm not allowed to say is weird.
How I felt with Black Panther, because, and I wasn't annoyed as much that backlash happened when people were like, well, it's actually not that good with Get Out, because there wasn't much good in the film. But when people backlash against let's say the zealous positivity about Black Panther, I was angry, because, like, you know, there's aspects of the film, you know, that are very good, but because you've blown it up and inflated it to the point where it's just sort of preposterous, the first sort of visceral reaction, of course, is going to be, it's not that good. And it's like, well done, you've provided the avenue for people to just disregard your film and on the value in your film, and you know, it's just I don't know if they know they're doing that and don't care because it brings the hype, and the hype is what translates into money, or they're just truly unaware. But I think if they're truly unaware, they'll kind of cotton on soon enough. And I think that is the case with Captain Marvel, though I don't want to go there just yet, but because obviously there is a sort of a feministic sort of tinge to it that sort of is part of the marketing, but they you know, they haven't really gone all in on that like they did with Black Panther, because, you know, perhaps they're starting to realise.
Well, yeah. God, when you say something like that, I had like 3 things on Captain Marvel to talk about, but I want to stick with Black Panther for a second. Sure. There was a guy in my uni who I really like him, and I still do. But he made me, I suppose, he was one of the first people to make me open up to this idea that people do just feel different if they look different, and there's nothing I can do about it. But I've also witnessed the guy have feelings of transition himself between, like, actually that's not me, I don't feel like that. And it was this case of we were in uni, and he was like talking about how he feels alone, and, you know, no one's like him because he's black and the others aren't, we aren't. And it was like, well, he's identifying with his sunken place, and you could see that. And I'm not friends with him in his sunken place, right? People aren't friends with me when I'm running. You're not my friend.
Yeah. Well, no, he's identified with this sort of like the husk of himself, and, you know, metaphorically,
the seed of himself as well. There's something before he's come into existence, before he's faced any dragons at all.
Right, and, you know, and
he's in the primordial lava of his own kind of vessel.
Yeah, this is the sort of thing, and this is where I kind of get confused, because it's like there's a lot of talk now about representation, and of course that's like, you know, that was kind of fraught in the whole sort of Black Panther conversation, and you know, the promotion even. But I don't need to see someone. I don't need to see someone who's black or mixed race in order to identify with the character. Like if I think about, you know, the formative characters in my life, Luke Skywalker, almost said Anakin, but he murdered children, so I'll leave that one out for now. But if you look at Luke Skywalker, you know, the fact that he, you know, I'm mixed race and he was white, it didn't factor into it at all. I just understood what he was striving for, where he felt he needed to go, and where he was at in the current time. It
speaks very much to the literality of the mind.
Right.
The idea that you're going, you think he's like me? No, he's not. I'm black. So, well, how different do you want to be from everyone? If you're different from...
What's the actual aim? Is the aim more segregation? And I used that word kind of previously, but is it more separation, or is it more unity? What's the aim? And the thing is, this problem is that often these things are posited as a means to further unity. But in actual fact, what you're doing, I see in how it manifests, I see in reality is separation and disparities in thought and you know, and subjectivity, and it's not good.
Well, Morgan Freeman said something along the lines of, if you want to get rid of racism, stop talking about it. But
Right.
I don't think, to clarify,
That's not the way. Yeah, right. Obviously.
Well, what I was going to say is, I don't think that he was referring to the demographic that we are in, how we're speaking about it. I think he's talking about it like, if you want to stop having small talk conversation that's boring, stop talking about traffic and the weather and politics.
Right.
I think it's a similar thing. We're not looking to have limiting.
We're not
like,
saying,
obviously you're black, so you think. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
It's not. It's the thing is that the critics of that sentence will say, well, you can't deal with racism just by not talking about it. No, it's like
now racism isn't the noun that we're talking about. It's one of many things in a large field.
Right.
And we're trying to get to that. We're trying to articulate a dimension of oscillating around plenty topics and realizing how free we are from the binds of them.
But and I'll stop you there, because increasingly race and identity is being sort of put forward as the lens in which we should see like an increasing amount of things. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, food, dress, films, music, language, and it's are there any more things? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Uncle Ben's rice used to be similar to KFC, how it's sold. Like, it was just like, it's just rice. So like, it's good rice.
Yeah.
But now the advert is like, come to London, experience the mixed race of all of the people that have come to London, and have the Uncle Ben's rice. And it's like, where's this come from? She said, I thought I like the advert, but it's pitching to this idea of of like thinking through what you're associating with
race. And and
whether you're celebrating it, liberating it, or just acknowledging it.
Right. And I thought, you know, well, how it was kind of taught to me is that the arrow forward is a point where, you know what, in the minutiae of day-to-day life, in the micro, you know, in the micro sense, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter in interactions. It doesn't matter in what you have to say, especially if you're an intelligent person, even intellectuals. You know, we were talking briefly before this about the Jordan Peterson. What was that interview? What event was that?
It was about political correctness, wasn't it?
Yeah, the monk, wasn't it? Or was that the guy? Name of the guy?
He was a priest. He was a preacher.
Okay, yeah, a preacher, second name monk, debating with Jordan Peterson at this political correctness event, and it's the idea that a guy of Peterson's intellectual ability and stature exactly can't talk on topics to do with black culture or black history or whatever because he's not black. And it's just
as a preacher, he kind of went into this huge rhythmical way of speaking, and it was against an authority that was up and beyond, and he thought he had fixed that authority there and then in the face of Jordan Peterson himself, embodied as the white man devil who couldn't possibly have anything good to say about anybody that wasn't privileged and white. And it was like, I was just totally confused. Like, Stephen Fry was in this same room, I'm pretty sure. And
sitting next to Jordan Peterson, yeah.
Yeah, and it was a shame because I understand Jordan Peterson to be on the same level as Stephen Fry, but you could see because of the preacher, Jordan Peterson was dragged into debates that meant that he was going off topic from political correctness, as Stephen Fry was talking about it. But it was just disappointing. But I felt a lot for Jordan Peterson because he was just personally offended. He just saw like a really wickedness.
Yeah,
right there.
I think to be honest,
he said you're a mean white man, wasn't it?
Yeah. You just had to face the fact that you're a mean old white man, and that was a way to basically disregard any of his arguments. Like, everything you're bringing up is irrelevant, and someday you're gonna have to face the fact that it all just boils down to the fact that you're a mean old white man. And
imagine if I said that. Imagine if he said, "You're just like an overtly religious, God-fearing preacher from the deep south."
Yeah,
or whatever. I don't know where he's from.
You're a caricature of a black man or whatever. You know what I mean?
You enforce stereotypes so as to feel better about sleeping at night about your position in life.
Right. Well, it's funny. No, it's funny because when you were doing like your little fucking I stop you with the power of against the devil of his. This is what I took from this. Is what I enjoyed from it, even though I didn't enjoy much. But this is what I enjoyed, that he did that, thinking like I'm the supervillain, taking on the sort of the fucking proverbial, beast, the dragon, the terror, and it supervillain, yeah, right. And it didn't play off. It just didn't resonate. And he saw that, and his face, I thought it was hilarious, and I thought it gave me vindication to see it just fall flat. But I also saw in his face that he was like, how did this not work? And it's like, well, and for me, like, that's where the source is, because like these people have been told for so long now that this is how you motivate people, this is how you galvanize, and when it doesn't work, they're lost, because this has been such a strong theme of, I tentatively say mainstream culture, but
the main actor in. Not the main actor, the actor in Blackout. Fucking hell.
Well, yeah, basically.
Imagine if it was called Blackout. That would be crazy. And there, sometimes they turn off the lights sometimes in the film. Blackout. In Get Out, the main actor also has his role in Black Panther. And he, again, is playing quite an annoying role in my eyes. The best film I've seen him in was... in terms of him, like his performance, was Steve McQueen's film about it was a full female, like strong ensemble female cast about them breaking out of a bank, and he's playing this because he's kind of in the reddened phase in those films. He's got a gun and he's a dickhead, and he can really do that really well. Right. But in Black Panther, he's like, I have the power of the rhino. And I feel mildly betrayed. and disrespected, so I'm gonna start killing my own people. And you think, Jesus Christ, what kind of energy are you dealing with? What are you channeling? Jim Carrey and Mike Myers channeled something in their lives, but this guy, he's definitely channeling something. And it's interesting to think, well, to be honest, that is a very annoying energy. I'm glad someone's highlighting it as annoying, and then having these arcs in these films where he's not being passive aggressive anymore and actually dealing with problems head on. He's not denying himself. He's not feeling all self-involved and betrayed, and he's actually sacrificing his own sort of idea of false pride for a greater good, such as Wakanda and love.
Yeah, you know what's interesting about that is that there's a scene that they cut out of the film where he speaks to his wife, Koya, and then they have that. They sort of like they hash out their different sort of they hash out their ideological differences, and you know, and she brings up a lot of the points you're bringing up. It's like, how can you do this to Wakanda? Don't you see that you're by trying to fight for our creed in your way, in the way you're doing so, you're destroying our creed and you're destroying our way of life and our spirituality, and all of these things are kind of dealt with and come forward, but they cut it out of the film.
Right.
So for me, without that, like the whole idea of him branching off and you know, doing his own thing and joining Michael B. Jordan's character, it just kind of it acts as chaos. It just acts as sort of like bland chaos. Yeah. You know?
I would have loved his character to be honest, to stay as a friend who then goes a bit shit. It would have been more powerful for me if not fighting against Black Panther, but if he just said, I'm out.
Sure. If
he just said, I'm not going to fight this battle, and he didn't support Black Panther, that would have been so much more interesting for me for that guy's character. But to be troching around with Rhino, I could feel a bit upset, right, about somebody not finding the villain that killed my dad or something. Or I can't remember what it is. But I'm not going to start killing my own people with like 3-ton rhinos.
He instead of killing him, as he said he promised, we didn't really promise. He said, if he gets away, if he's going to get away, I'm going to kill him. I won't take him prisoner. He like handed him over to the CIA, so he's completely out of Wakandan reach, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but he's the king,
right?
So,
yeah.
But my point being, the function he could have played would have been really cool. Is this because I see much more villainous indifference than I do villainous action
through that guy's acting.
Through the energy he was in Get Out, and through the power of the kind of what he's able to, definitely what I'm able to see in culture around like the nasty nature of the sideline character that isn't king. Mm-hmm. Remember, the film's called Black Panther. It's not called Wakanda.
Right.
So this character really should be relative to the king.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And with that, the villain, if you took out that guy's screen time and gave it to the villain and gave the villain a little bit more substance once he actually made his ascendancy to the throne, right, which was all interesting. But then when he got to the throne, he kind of descended into a totally illogical way of conducting himself that really undermined the character, the whole plot of the film, the Wakandan culture. This is so much ruined, and just shifting your priority of how you spend your time in the film could have really dealt with that well.
This goes beautifully into what is like the major point of contention and confusion for me in Black Panther, and it's like, who is the protagonist? Because it just seems to me, like, in terms of energy, like Michael B. Jordan is this like swashbuckling, like suave. Like,
he gets out of that film looking fucking good.
You know what I mean? Like fucking steal your girl.
And in the meantime, he's the same actor that everyone's associating that guy with. He's he was in the Fantastic Four film as the Flame that flopped, but he's also playing like the new Black Rocky. So like the idea of this ascendant story is bound to this guy's face, and you see him on screen. He comes out and it's like, whoa, hi, and like comparative to Black Panther, he looked he had like a lot of appeal, and that was what I suppose that's what was fascinating about him as a villain.
You know, do you know what I think that was though, Charles? I think they felt so constrained to how they presented Chad Bosewick's character in Civil War, which is the sort of sullen, you know, my dad's just died, I'm about to take this responsibility on, and I understand the importance of that kind of influence. So, like, for instance, when it comes to the dream scenes when he goes back and sees his father in the safari, but I wanted to see him more into his identity and role as a regent, you know.
Sure. I mean, I wouldn't. That's kind of like a chicken and egg thing. But Kevin Feige and everyone have been like on this case for a long time. Like the limit from a previous film is like, well, these things have already been decided a long while out before it's been made human. But I mean, James Bond is quite refined. Like, from the outer eye, if James Bond appeared in one of these films from afar, you're not going to see him enraged. But in a film just about James Bond, he might get enraged. Because of the nature of the character he plays. He was that in Civil War. In this film, you could be a sullen character, but if you're 5-6 layers deep in failing upon your missions or coming up against the odds and beating 4 out of 5 every time, you could still get very far in how you present.
So, and I'm saying they did not account for that in any way. You know, yeah. I see. I look at the I look at the situation that's actually unraveling in that film in Black Panther. He's got something. He's had something come out of his blind spot essentially and take aim at the very kind of core of Wakanda, like in terms of its values and you know, in a symbolical way. And he was more like, oh, we're just kind of at war. Kinda, not really. We're having a fight in the house, you know.
Well, yeah.
His outlook towards it all just seemed very sort of didn't really have any space. It seemed very narrow, you know.
Well, what he is in the comics is interesting in the sense that T'Challa, is someone that comes up against T'Challa. You chilling? He comes up against Captain America in early comics and stuff like that, and I don't know when he gets his first comics on his own or if he...
I think it was in the 80s, late 70s, 80s.
Right. But originally, he's characters that, like, you know, like Spider-Man comes up against someone and he's like, I'm just trying to earn money from my dad who's dying, so I put on a cape. And it's kind of like, he was similar to that. He's a misunderstood, competent fighter that Captain America comes across, which is kind of what's illustrated in Civil War. That's the energy he is in these early comics. But he's also really tribal and forthright in a kind of strong way, like whether he's out on vengeance. I think that idea of his being an animal, he and eventually being part of the Avengers as well, there is a vengeful aspect of him. But this film focused a lot on the kind of hip hop rise of focused a lot on ideologies around black culture, which definitely engages a market and is really interesting. But in terms of strength to the comic book, it was a modernization rather than a...
Yeah, well, then the question is, who's the market? I'm not going to go into that, but, you know.
Well,
the market is comic book fans.
The market's comic book fans?
Yeah.
Well, comic books are markets for comic book fans. I think these films are markets for comic book fans squared, in the sense that it's how socially acceptable is it to be a comic book fan now, and they're saying, well, it's more because of these movies. It's kind of like the expansion point has to go beyond that. Like, I don't know. It should be comic book fans, but this one and Captain Marvel have said...
Yeah, it's probably me being idealistic. I understand in order to have, like...
they're bringing it to films to transcend their market.
in order to have a cultural phenomenon like Black Panther, like or even in Infinity War, like you can't, it has to have diverse appeal. I don't mean that in diverse in like sort of a SJW way. I mean like actual like diverse, like people who, in terms of taste and what they like in films and what they might not like about the sort of graphic novel format,
right?
Of story.
But a totally valid point. If you wanted to bring in the market, make it just about the comic book, and then, funnily enough, I'm pretty sure if there's a female superhero, more films are going to come. If there's a black superhero, more black people are going to come.
Right.
I don't think you need to fucking fist anybody.
Right. Yeah.
It's like that's a different www.com. That's
right.
it. that's for another day. That's for another day. And the vengefulness that I understood to be part of the king, which is kind of he gets to the end, towards the end of the movie, but then you'd barely see it, and then the next film he's fighting aliens, so he's not really vengeful of anyone specific. He's kind of, as you said, he stays quite solemn.
Yeah.
Or refrained.
Yeah, and it's just, I thought, like, I really liked the civilizational crisis, which I hope we can talk about, because like, and how that sort of concluded and came to a resolve. But I just maybe need a stronger idea of Wakanda in the film and out of the film to have that sort of weight. But I just wanted to see him be like, we're fighting for the survival of our way. Because if you're going to purposely make it that he's not interacting with anything on an international platform, then you have to sort of bring that sort of dynamism back to the interior space of Wakanda,
Well, this is so where I was talking about dynamism to that was interestingly put. The idea of what they did this time was to say, with this film, in my eyes, is kind of what Jordan Peterson talks about with you have to rescue your father from the belly of the whale.
Right.
So he has to, in this film, take his father's way and let it transcend its limitations that allow it to be infiltrated by someone like Michael B. Jordan. Sorry, right. Let it be infiltrated by Michael B. Jordan, the villain in the film.
Right.
The way I would have done the film is to say, no, these guys, they're not just technologically advanced. They have the moral structure of maternal essence that's primordial, chthonic, maternal, and like of Earth.
Yeah, I just want to point out here that we've been speaking about Black Panther for about 15 minutes and not said the word vibranium. So I think that in itself is an achievement. So yeah, but here it comes. And it's not just so their value is just something outside of vibranium, which I think most people will agree on this film. That like most people will kind of chime in and agree with when it comes to this film, because everything on their value just seems to boil down to or trace back to vibranium. It's like, well, no,
vibranium's supposed to be something that has a metaphorical or symbolic value for a substance of value that's already there. For instance, they are of high morality. The vibranium is something that means that when they cover themselves in the vibranium, they can interact like superheroes in a comic book world, as if their high morality has substance. It suddenly materializes and gives them great power.
A creed or a philosophy or certain rituals and
a vibration that actually resonates with everyone and works.
Right. And that's why I like the sort of the scenes where the tribes will come together and watch them fight. I like those scenes. Like there's certain tonality of it that I thought could be improved. But I like this idea that the king takes on a personal responsibility to keep his kingdom. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
it's like the dogs in Jungle Book. There's a kind of animalistic, canine,
exactly the same, isn't it?
fascinating nature to it that seems quite primal and needs to be respected in some ways.
It's quite a transcendent idea. Like even like the king, even the royal is not above the ideal of individual capability and
combat
and dexterity, you know.
Yeah, I mean it kind of brings to the forefront of the mind like UFC. You've got this. There's something amazing about watching these people in a cage fight, and they get such respect for it. And it's similar with this king thing, like the fact that the king has to fight off anybody that wants to be king. There's a similar kind of simmering down to your base elements to say like I am more worthy than you, that demands respect in a similar way to what we do with stuff like UFC or like boxing. But yeah,
and this I guess this will be seen as nitpicky, but you know, whatever, we're here. But I think because he gets defeated in the 1-to-1 with Michael B. Jordan, and I think they have a scene where he goes back to the father before that, and it's like, no, do it after that, because then it's like, I've been defeated. I need to think about why I've been defeated. I need to go back to a core idea of myself that aligns with the values of Wakanda, and you know, that mirror the values of Wakanda, and then succeed, and then you know, and then overcome and all that good stuff. But
interesting there.
Yeah,
there's a good opportunity there in the film,
and you know, they scuppered it. You know, but that links back to this idea that they weren't really dealing with the sort of the subtext,
the arc of the film.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they weren't really dealing with that in terms of, well, we have this existential, very philosophical and crisis when it comes to our kingdom, and I need to sort of the only way that is remedied or made worse is through my actions. So watch my actions. You know, there wasn't too much of that.
Yeah, and I don't know how to put it. The shovel they used to look into the collective unconscious with this film is really interesting to me. It's Michael B. Jordan's character, and wow, look how empowering it is to be combative like Ares, god of war, and say, I understand polarities, I understand the idea of duality, I know how to work through systems, identify systems, negative frameworks, and transcend them. I know how to put myself in the center of it. I know how to empower me. I know how to utilize pride. I know how to rid myself of shame and transcend binds through just lighting myself on fire. I mean, that's a Fantastic Four kind of reference there, but that's the kind of idea he's dealing with.
Right.
But similar to what happens when a grime artist gets money and they can't sing about being poor anymore, you've kind of got something that happened, or same with hip hop. I mean, they kind of sing about, like, look how much I've got now, like songs like I woke up in a new Bugatti, like that's interesting. But if I was talking about this, he gets to the throne and then he doesn't have any moral impetus to be integrated. But he lost all villainy for me there. He then just became something that juxtaposes against the main character, Black Panther, because Black Panther had some kind of moral standpoint at all, and didn't just think about logic. But I do want to really pick out Michael B. Jordan's ideas on the throne as to why, because somebody must have sat down and written this guy's intention. They must have sat down and written something about what he wanted to do when he was on the throne, and what they came up with was wacky for me. Right,
and
you don't have to agree with anything I'm saying. I'm interested.
I think that the way that in which he served as a good vehicle is that this idea that you need to integrate. So in like a democratic society with free speech and a liberal order, you need to listen to the voice of the dissenters, and you must seek to integrate that in any way you can for there to be order and for there to be people to feel represented and so forth. And I feel like through the sort of synergy and peace that Black Panther and Michael B. Jordan's character sort of end with, I feel like that that's how they facilitate that. But again, for me, it's this sort of confusing thing where it's like, who's the protagonist? Because after he takes the throne, then Michael B. Jordan has his goes back and sees his father moment, and I think I can't remember exactly what happened. It was traumatic. Either his father's dead, or he's just blank. He's like, I've got nothing to tell you, and like, I was a traitor and all the rest of it, and he just can't take it. And it's like, well, that's the sort of crisis that I want to see the protagonist in.
Yeah, a lot of the villain's villain
right.
storyline was kind of stolen from what's normally the hero's arc.
Right, and I feel like they put focus on Michael B. Jordan's crisis, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's interesting. It grabbed me because
But it is the kind of thing that means it feels okay as an audience for T'Challa to just die in Infinity War. He's just dead.
Yeah.
Like, and if he'd had this full story that wasn't just about him dealing with other people, maybe it would have been a bit like, maybe there's different decisions to be made. But knowing he's going to die, it's like, let's deal with the whole of Wakanda.
Right.
I don't know, maybe.
And then and to be honest, I got to be fair. I had similar problems with the four films, beginning with, because like I have no idea who the Asgardians are until 3. But even then, it's like, because the first 2 films were flops, they were just like, okay, we don't have the sort of luxury of doing that now. Let's just make a good character-driven 4th film, right? So I do wish they sort of went into who the Asgardians are. So it's like, it's not the first time Marvel Studios kind of, made this error. But
wait, what era are you talking about? Because I thought in the Thor film you're talking about them not going into it, and in the Wakandan film we're talking about them going into it too much.
No, well, in terms of why Black Panther isn't T'Challa isn't just some character who can just fall off the wayside, right? Like, what is his values, and then by contrast, what are the values of the society and the thing that he rules over? You know what I mean? It's like there's a lot of focus on who Thor's meant to be. He's meant to be a ruler, but a ruler over what? Other than just a group of people. Like, what are those group of people? Who are they? What do they stand for? You know what I mean?
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's part of what you've told me. Like, you saw the animated series of that had like the Wakandans in it, and they were like an order of black elves, and we were both like, fucking, that's shit hot. That's what it should be.
Yeah, an order of black elves. Yeah, I mean, in this one, by them having these different tribes and him uniting them, I kind of wanted them to still just be united. I like the celebration of the different animals, but it does take away an idea of the unity. It just made a backdrop for Black Panther to be a unifying element for the end, but that means that Wakanda's like this vast collection of things, kind of like a multicultural society.
Again, I didn't get the focus on that where it was needed. I got the focus on who the other tribe, the sort of rival tribe, what they're about, and obviously they have a more like warring mindset, and they put more emphasis on combat and what that reveals about the ability of a human, or how that how that assesses value in a human being. But again, that's not the protagonist.
There was a challenge in the film with regards to the logic for me of that technology with vibranium as well.
Sure.
So do some of them, and it would just becomes pretty at that point.
Sure.
Like, okay, so they all have these cloth pieces of clothing. Some of them have embroidery on it, and some of them are able to turn that into shields and force fields. Others, I mean, do they all have that? And it seems like I'm being nitpicky, but I really enjoy feeling like I understand the universe I'm watching.
Right.
With Captain America, like, they invested in all this Nazi and Art Deco architecture as a concept of the way the science worked and the era of it,
right?
The feeling of it, you got the vibe.
Guardians of the Galaxy. Everywhere you go, it's its own fully fledged, self-contained world.
Yeah,
and that even just a fucking prison building in the first one. You know what I mean? And my God, if you can't. And
Thor addresses the line in his. He says, "Where I'm from, science and magic are the same thing." If you look at Iron Man, he says a lot of you watch him create like a new element. You watch him build the suit. You see the mechanics of how his idea of the science works. In this film, you have like a 19-year-old girl just like sorting out everything like she's Q from James Bond, but like on her own, and there's rarely anyone else in the science lab. I felt like they just said, it was kind of like when I watched Ocean's 8 and it just said, "Hey, we're women, but we can do what George Clooney did." And it's like, you could have, guys, if you didn't make Rihanna paint her toenails while she was hacking the computer system as if she can do that.
Right.
You could have.
And that's meant to be.
That's meant to be an idea that they can do it better.
That's meant to be, yeah, but in a larger sense, that's meant to be like a nod to women, or that's meant to be sort of.
Yeah, women do their toenails while we're at work, or like women can smoke big blunts and do it just as good as everyone else. It was like, to be honest, it was hot. I'm glad it was.
That's not what you wanted me to take from it. You wanted me to.
You didn't want me to call you hot right now. You want me to think you're accomplished and able to do a £1 billion bank robbery. You didn't want me to think I want to. Ellipsis.
That's why and we've moved from so many things here. That's why I thought Sicario was so cool. It's like, it's just a competent, like, capable and woman who just fucking seeing it through a lens and trying to get it done, and she struggles and she fails, but then I think she comes out on, morally on top. People have different views on that. They think that it's meant to show that, her moral view is redundant, but I don't think that's what the film is saying.
What we were getting to there, though, was this idea that Wakanda did not develop the necessary means of being able to justify the level of either technology or environmental indulgence that they had. Like they got Oscar they got nominated at least. I don't know, they might have got it for best costume, but they definitely got nominated for best costume, and I think for some of the best CGI stuff as well.
That's crass.
And yeah, like, I don't know if were they just politically motivated because there was so many people from quote unquote minorities in this film, or was it actually astounding enough? Like, to be honest, I think on costume, I'd actually give it to him. On the logic of the world that the costumes put forward, I would not. I would not. So it's interesting on that front.
Yeah, here's the thing, and it's kind of, we're gonna kind of come full circle, and I think if they'd have made an effort to not let the entire sort of notion of the film slip into that, it's like, well, here's a film with black superheroes, everyone rejoice, then they would have had to sort of stand on their own 2 feet a bit more as a film, and they would have sorted the things out that they would have sorted out, because you know.
Very interesting. So because they kind of like what Jordan Peterson talks about with the dragon in the room is something that you haven't spoken about. Like, this relationship's going bad. It's probably going to go worse if I don't just say it's going bad.
Right.
And so by them not being able to say what they're trying to do with the film, that empty or unsaid space took up too much time and attention of the themes.
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
Right. Yeah. I'd go as far as to say that's like a consistent. I won't say trope. It's a consistent character trait to a lot of films nowadays. Like, you, because we can't out and out say like this is like propaganda. I'm not saying it is propaganda, but we can't out and out say that this is just a vehicle for a social message. Let's do everything around it to make sure it doesn't come off just exactly like that, but it just falls flat.
Sure. I mean, if you look at, like, do you know the name of the actresses that are from Bridesmaids?
No.
Well, you know the largest one, the comedian. She's doing well on her own.
Right. Yeah.
Her. I'm talking about her, and I'm talking about Will Ferrell films.
Sure.
If they were just able to out and out admit that they are improvised comedy on 2 shots and over the shoulders,
yeah,
then you could watch like something along the lines of Laurel and Hardy, where you just watch them get up to wacky shit and one thing after another happens, and then right at the end they say, "I still love you," even though we've been upset with each other. Also, but what they do is they go, "This is a film that is going to tick all the boxes for having a moral story throughout the whole film, and I'm going to say the odd swear word throughout it and be a bit weird." And it really, by them trying to, like, I'm going to www.fist.com again and just going, ooh, I'm just gonna pretend this is a normal arc of a film here. I don't have any different intentions. It's like, yeah, you do. You really slacked on the front of
I think
of the storyline.
Is the most kind of fucking flagrant example of that.
Which?
Ocean's 8.
Interesting.
Well, yeah, I don't see how anything in that film was even meant to honestly stand separate from the fact that they're, like you said, women doing Ocean's 11 things.
Yeah, I mean, with regards to that, when I started trying to do coding, I gave up. Just to tell you, but right. I felt much more happy with myself and my idea of coding once I was able to decipher what lorem ipsum or ipsum lorem meant, and it's kind of like filler text. So when you're making a website and you know that there'll be like 300 words of a paragraph there, right, on the right hand side in the margin. You type in lorem ipsum or ipsum lorem, and it kind of refers, and it just types in like Latin text for however many words you want to put in.
Sure.
So when I understood that was what that meant,
yeah,
like reading The Matrix, half of what was on the page I didn't have to read because I knew it was filler text.
Right.
And I was able to say like, oh.
This is what I'm saying. You're switching people off to the content of your movies.
Yeah, so they've just got these shots where, especially in that film, because a lot of it's about the idea of what you don't know, like for the twists and stuff. You've got these scenes of 2 people speaking about things you don't understand, like, how are you going to do this? You'll see. And you're like, oh, this is the most filler thing, but you are really pretty, and I like how you whisper. Like, so it's really, they don't want to be objectified. Maybe they do. Maybe that's the secret that's happening with these films.
Whoa! Shut down! No, carry on.
Well, yeah, that's what they're doing there. Like, it was the first film, even though it was annoying, that I really liked Sandra Bullock on camera. I actually didn't find her annoying.
I always liked Sandra Bullock on camera. I think the only reason recently I thought Bird Box was trash, but
I didn't like her in The Proposal. I mean, she played a very annoying role.
Sandra Bullock brings a healthy skepticism to the role, which is what Ocean's 8 sorely needed. You know?
Yeah. Well, I thought she was really good. I wasn't expecting much of it because I could see what it was, but via the advert.
Yeah, that's what I said earlier on. You know,
yeah.
You know.
But the because I expected very little of it. When they came up from nothing to show some pretty interesting moments, I thought it was mildly fun. But then if they want the film to be taken at all seriously, don't put James Corden in as the adversary who's watching over them and checking their decisions. Right. Because he just turned it into some kind of sort of Peter Rabbit film.
Right. Yeah, just seeing him is like, oh, we're snakes and adders now. You know what I mean?
I wasn't intimidated by him. I felt like he was about to make some pastries and I don't know. And eat them. And just and watch Peter Rabbit. Yeah.
And
the worst part about the film, if I was gonna shit on the films, just like, you know, the film's happening, but then just parades of poo just come down from the sky, and there's me waving down like, oh, that's my shit right there. Is when they keep referencing the film in the film. They go, so I get it. It's brilliant. You're framing it all on the ex-boyfriend, and you're getting away with it. That's perfect. It's mind-boggling. It's genius. Don't tell me how I'm supposed to feel about the fucking film I'm watching, ever.
Right. Well, I think
if you do it without words.
Listen, man. These ideologically driven films, they have to do that. Because especially, let's scoot back to Get Out. You have a bunch of people, mostly white people, who are like, so how am I meant to feel now? How am I meant to feel now? How am I meant to feel now? And you have to constantly supply on that basis. Because if you were to let people go and be like, just give them no context whatsoever and just like watch this, they'll be like, I'm not too sure. You know what I mean? But because of you're trying to get a message out, it's constant prompts, and that's the only way these things can work. Because they don't want people to
be people.
They don't want you to think for yourself. But they don't want you to think for yourself. You know, they want you to go. I mean, I guess that's just films in general. But like, in this really sort of strict sense, they want you to go where they want you to go and nowhere else.
Well, I was thinking of trying to make a new philosophy because I like the ideas of isms. I think it's a fascinating thing that people did, and a lot of my friends are quite fixated on philosophy as a subject that's kind of people having conversations about life. They'd end up more like conversations about conversation.
Sure.
Why don't we have lives based around conversation, not conversations based around life? My point with that being the
like
idea of
ancient Greek society, like Athens.
Yeah.
No.
Like the function of conversation in the way that it works with philosophy is this idea of, well, we're going to talk until talking's done, and then it won't be done, because if you've developed a habit of you enjoy talking, you're just going to dissect everything till everything's meaningless, and you'll end up in that kind of like late 20th century sort of French nihilistic space.
And we all feel satisfied because we've spoken to more and more things, and you know, when we do switch to actions, our actions are less erratic and misinformed and driven by emotions and just chaotic. I mean, that's like the core functionality of free speech. But I understand what you're saying. It's not just having speech that is free; it's having speech that is encouraged, that is respected. You know, it's that the thing itself is sort of being supplanted as a sort of opus.
Free, encouraged, and respected.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, that's nice. And so what I thought of was I've really been fascinated with etymology since leaving school. Well, separate to school studies, you don't really study etymology in school. No. The etymology being like the study of the origin of words and language and how they interplay.
It's more of a constructivist sort of.
Huh?
It's more of a you learn words structurally in their sort of like rote structure, but then other than that,
yeah, like logic coming from logos or logi, and you see where they come from throughout culture and see the different strands of where they come from. And it fascinated me with how we communicate, and it bridged a lot of gaps that, as a dyslexic child, I was like, well, what's the point in these things? And then seeing that there's kind of this intricate mosaic spiderweb of where they've come from, and what they mean and what they could mean in different cultures is fascinating. But so I came up with this idea because etymology meant true essence, logic, or true essence of logic. So because ology, I was thinking of etymism, or etymism, and so it's like a philosophy based around thinking about the true essence of things. And for me, that went into a lot of things like pronouns, right? So how we talk, we say, I'm using we a lot. I'm using a royal we, which suggests an ability for everyone to identify with the singular self when I'm talking on their behalf as well, and letting them think like that.
Like that headspace we did last night, like that silence.
Yeah.
Right.
Headspace and meditation requires an intrapersonal, not in, as in me, myself, and I concept that other people are able to help you engage with. Yeah.
Sure. To help you engage.
As opposed to interdependent language, such as "Hello, Marco. How are you?"
Yeah. Right.
There's a space between us.
And
between
people
us.
do that anyway. It's just like whether it's like trying to find out if validate their own experiences. Like, are you cold right now? Was like, or saying, was that weird what you just did? But like also it's just like people when people, that's what people do when they remark to an atmosphere. It's like, I like this. I like where we are right now. You know what I mean? Or where we are right now has this quality. You know what I mean? That's remarking on something that you think that is bonding people together and pulling people together.
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily.
It's very different to the use of the word they.
Right.
Which is what I was getting to. Is you have an ability to say, they've done this study now. Oh, they think this. Most people, since this dawn of
there is a study.
The prominence of science.
Opposed to there is a study, and
there is a study that suggests.
Here's some collective knowledge.
Yeah, we create this huge phenomena. Imagine if you were to paint a picture of what they is to the psyche of the human when we hear they mainly being put on.
Well, we do doing it ourselves today.
Yeah,
you're right.
But I'm actively not trying to create a big evil somewhere. Which is a natural habit that people fall into when we use a word like they for everything. We say, the scientists that did that experiment, they found out, and we kind of have this idea that there's a kind of potential malicious evil behind a potential huge group of highly intelligent scientists that are discovering everything at a rate of knots.
Right.
Because of our use of pronouns.
Well, and say that does have evil roots, but it could just be one scientist. The thing is, what's ambiguous is the vastness of the they.
The vastness, and it's often a lot of cognitive dissonance. A lot of theys that will use they to describe people doing paranormal science and stuff like that. And then people
I thought you were pointing to my legs and were like saying Paralympic, and I was like, right. That's real, guys. That wasn't there. Okay, but like paranormal sciences, so so they think this is like, well, actually, when it comes to the paranormal, there's a vast variety of beliefs, and not everyone. Some people think Bigfoot is real. Some people think Bigfoot is a transcendental, a transdimensional being. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that you wouldn't see within the light spectrum anyway.
But when you say they believe Bigfoot is a transdimensional being, you think, well, that's what Bigfoot is to people.
Yeah.
Full stop.
Well, talking on parascience quickly before rein it back in, because we've gone quite far out in the void here. But I'm enjoying it.
Question is anyone else? No, Karen.
Rupert Sheldrake talked about...
It doesn't really matter. You don't matter.
Rupert Sheldrake talks about who wrote the God Delusion, the Science Delusion, which is a response to Richard Dawkins' The God Delusion, kind of saying like well, there is an innate kind of awareness and connection to nature, and there is a lot of false and limiting ideologies within the paradigm of the scientific vernacular and mind.
Reason and empiricism.
Yeah.
Right, and
because he thinks he's a devout scientist, so he doesn't have a problem with science, but he has a problem with the cognitive dissonance of scientists who say we aren't connected to nature, or that all behaviour is taught, but then they'll go to their country cottage and chill in nature for 2 weeks and realise they feel much better.
I think it's more straightforward than that. I think it's just like, well, the science is the form and if you want to say art of finding out what we don't know and finding out that we don't know things. So, and with that being the case, science has to look at. So, let's take an example for religious experiences or psychedelics. We don't know how that happens and how that materializes. We don't know why people respond to weather.
Not inherently. Like we know what we can do on an atomic level is say like there's no vitamin D here because of sun.
We don't know like the complete metaphysical origins of it. We don't know the metaphysical. We just don't.
Yeah, and this is what I was saying.
And that doesn't mean that's not that's not like evidence about there's an absence thing. It's not saying, which means it could definitely be there. It's just is that position of, well, we don't know, so we can't ironically in the religious way say, well, that's false. That's, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's what I was getting to with the Rupert Sheldrake stuff on the paranormal, is that there's more science on paranormal than almost anything else.
Sure.
According to this book, Science Delusion, but it's because the reason being is because it's put up to more scrutiny.
Sure.
Because they're often on psychedelic concepts, like idea of being able to know something through intuition.
That's aggressive. What is intuition?
As in tests like.
Yeah, that's a great example.
Yeah, what a lot of the results came positive to the idea of about 2/3 as opposed to 50-50.
Sure.
Like a guess that should be 50-50, they asked humans to psychically read what page number a book is on in the other room and things like that, and the results came out more around the 2/3 line of humans had a better chance than the idea of 50-50, which is what science would say.
Yeah, it's just it's randomized.
Yeah,
because that's a good point, because the 0% isn't randomized. You know what I mean? It's like 0% is completely set on the idea that would lead to the idea that there's completely no, humans just never get things right, which obviously, that would be like, if you're saying it's just, I kind of messed up, but I'm saying, if you're just saying there's just chance, then it wouldn't just be 0%. You know what I mean? It would be, like you say, it would be somewhere around the middle. You know what I mean? 30% maybe, 40%, or maybe even 50%. But that's not the case. So the question remains: how does this happen?
Yeah.
And
that's the interrogation of science is making sure that you're being honest with what's a question mark and what's a full stop.
Right.
And there's a question mark on a lot of things that science likes to call a full stop.
Sure.
But yeah. And what I would say leading on from that is that when we focus so much on the full stop, so i.e. when we say, empiricism and reason and logic in an absolutist sense, there's nothing wrong with those things individually, like, reason, logic, and what was the other thing I said? Empiricism. That's great. But it's clear now that that humans feed on prophecy, on story. It's one of the deities in the pantheon. I think it needs to be. It can't be a dominant force that throws its spiderwebs out and say, "I'm able to shit on story, religion, and your relationship with ritual and the sacred.
Right, because they represent a truth beyond the truth of, there's Jesus was born in Bethlehem or whatever.
I mean, science can show that if I did meditation, I have more alpha waves around my brain. They can't tell me what that does.
Yeah, and to me, this is even represented in sort of atheistic arguments, because it's like no one just says anymore that the Bible stories aren't literally true. Like, yeah, as in the sense that these things didn't happen once upon a time in the time they said they did. Maybe not, but they've adapted their argument beyond the ideas of the sort of the realness of the stories, because you have to integrate the reality that the stories have a value that is very real. You can't edge around that. That is part of the conversation, whether you want to have it or not. And I think the fact that it is, even for atheists, kind of just proves the fact that like people need this in some form, and what's important is that we have the right stories, we have the right myths, we have the right prophecy. We don't have things that will lead to chaos and evil and destruction.
Yeah, if I turned around and said, man, you can't like Star Wars unless you believe that Luke Skywalker was real, not many people would like Star Wars.
Right.
And some people would, but they'd be quasi-religious crazies.
Right.
Oh no, they'd be a cult.
It would lead to a way of being that would be like conducive to nothing, obviously, except madness.
Yeah.
And
there shouldn't be a divide of.
It's somewhere in between, like with most things.
Yeah, if you believe, it shouldn't be a divide of. You have to believe Jesus existed for the Bible to make any sense.
Right. No.
Because it's got too much moral value for it to be. It's better than any biopic I've heard for moral value.
Right.
I mean, Forrest Gump did pretty good, but that's not a biopic. That's an idea of that's like a
right.
That was a myth of a bit.
I love
a mythos.
We formed today a new way of saying the word biopic, and we've just rolled with it. It's biopic now. It's kind of like some sort of quasi anal probe sort of situation, and we're just that's the word, and we're going with it.
Biopic. Yeah. And where I was going with the pronoun stuff was this idea of etomism being something that says, I speak. If you look at pronouns, the top left one, which is how we read left to right and up to down,
sure,
is I.
Yeah.
And that's the first person singular.
Sure.
And the further down you go into group identities. Mm-hmm. And so I think the way we need to start being able to speak is stay up in that top left-hand corner, because that's the transformative potential.
Right.
And that's the truth of it. I can speak as I, and when I speak as we, let me put it in a way. So the power number in maths, you have n to the power of 1, 2, infinite number. That top right-hand corner is a power number. When I speak if I say I'm speaking as a 6'2" South English white male, I am speaking Charles to the power of.
Yeah.
What? That X, that power number is something like a 10,000, or I don't know how many put me in that category. If I say as a Brit,
and that's not the making of a good equation.
No. If I say I'm speaking Charles to the power of 70 million by saying I'm speaking as a British person,
right?
Then
that's somewhat better.
My point about this is that power number is a dividing number, not a timesing number. I have divided my ability to think as an individual and to navigate topics. I've divided.
That's interesting, because I was seeing it more, and maybe it's both things, but I was seeing it also has the ability to kind of serve as an orientational thing, and that's
when after the war, people said, "We are men, we are not machines."
Yeah,
there was very great value in the we, the power of whatever that was, whatever number he came up with.
Whatever.
But he was talking about that's him saying we, the planet.
Yeah.
So by that point, there is no division.
Whatever sort of boiled us down to sort of things beyond humans that can be thrown into ovens and gassed and all those horrible things. That is not our orientational point. That's not what we.
No, and we can lose our orientational point as a singular being by engaging with these power numbers and
with
group
meaning.
identities.
Because and Peterson says this over and over again. It's like meaning is the only way to stop things spiraling down to that. Because if you abandon meaning, eventually you'll get this idea that, you know what, it doesn't matter if we kill and if we murder and if we rape and do all the horrible things, it just doesn't matter. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think we're starting to see that in small doses, right? We're starting to see it doesn't matter if you do this because he is white male. It doesn't matter if you do this because she is cisgender. You know what I mean? Like,
it's fairly fucked up.
It's not on that. Okay, so it's not on that dramatic level of mass murder, and that's great. But in terms of what the effect that has on our shorthand and our daily interactions, I think it's fatal. I think it's terminal.
It's not a healthy trajectory.
No, right.
It's going the wrong way down the DNA spiral.
Right. Yeah.
You got. Yeah, DNA is supposed to travel down and forward through time. So if you're going up through time and backward, a lot of things are doing that. A lot of things are idolizing the
I feel like you have to unpack that a bit more.
Okay, vegans who love paganism.
Sure.
Going back to a time that's like ingrained within it is anti-establishment, like distaste for the world that their father brought them into.
Right.
And anger that there's overbred systems.
So yeah, you're saying going back as a way of going forward, and the distance that shows.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people in the 70s with their drug culture talked about the idea of trying to return to a time before culture had become just too dominating a force over nature. I mean, it would be the equivalent of a pond being moldy. I mean, culture is a word for algae, like culture that develops inside of a lake is
probiotic cultures.
Sorry? Probiotic cultures, yeah. And the idea of returning to a space when the lake was clean is to wipe humanity away, because
right. Yeah. Well, yeah. That's yeah.
And thus is coming from some kind of like postmodern deathly space of saying, fuck it all, I want to return to something else.
Thanos.
It's a death drive.
You're right.
It's saying I don't want to engage in my life anymore. I want to have a bath till the end of days. I want to and we all get that drive. I want when you're hungry and you're stressed, you say I want to eat the whole cake.
Yeah, no, it's a good perspective tool. Often when things have to be brought down, things have to be renewed, and it's great. But as I think we've been saying for a while, as an absolutist worldview, it's poison.
Yeah, it's a compensation from thinking you're part of a greater whole than something that is purely yourself. For instance, if I have a criticality of myself, that seems healthy. If I'm a criticality of a culture that is, I'm like, oh, I'm so defined by this, then I'm kind of like limited.
It's the difference between, let's take our plates outside and sit on the grass because we know good things are going to happen if we all did this, opposed to, you know what, let's draw the curtains, don't put a light on, eat quickly and go back up to our rooms.
Lacan and Freud talked about a life drive and a death drive. The death drive being related to Thanos or Thanatos, and this idea of returning to balance, as Thanos does in the Avengers. But the life drive, or eros, is kind of like libido, and it's the desire to adhere to what was called like a pleasure principle. So where the death drive says, I want to eat the whole cake, fuck right now, the pleasure principle says, let's be honest, just eat your one slice of cake and then see how you feel, because too much pleasure is actually pain.
Right. And we're in a place where the death drive, the postmodernism is, I think, is demonizing anything else. So if you go back to my sort of dodgy plate analogy, the postmodern is the sort of force saying, well, don't go outside, don't seek for more cohesion, because it's wrong to on these bases, and that's that's everywhere. I mean, look at with the Oscars, it's like, okay, so you had a film about a white character overcoming his racism and through interaction with a black character. Now, to me, that's a pretty redemptive message, right? But the postmodern can't let that be. The postmodern has to be, well, the black guy is used for is a vehicle used for the white person's growth or transcendence, and that is lowly, or that is disgracing, or the postmodern says, oh well, the white, it's a white cast overall that's put this movie together, so I don't even know what. So that means they can't deal with the elements of this film,
Well, there's something really low about both sides of that. The whole polarized idea of these inflated debates speak to the immaturity and literality of the minds that are engaging in it. Like, it's a fucking really good film about a guy who's playing a.
I haven't seen it. Is it good?
It won the Oscar. I'm gonna base on the assumption it's good. I really like the advert and the excerpt that I've seen on IMDb. It's like a 3-minute really strong scene. The advert's also pretty long, and you can see that the guy who played Aragorn, who by nature is Viggo Mortensen, discovering the kind of quintessence of what masculinity is about, whilst trying to shed off your kind of past shadows and pains and your own self-indulgences. I mean, he does that in pretty much all of his roles. In this one, he's playing like a prejudiced, kind of stuck, ignorant guy in an ignorant time, as like an Italian life immigrant, huh?
A dead end life, like a bouncer for a nightclub,
Yeah, and he's not representative of the white man. He's a man, and he's an Italian, like, or he's a, what's it called? He's a part of a subculture in itself. Right. So that whole debate is kind of odd. Right. And in contrast, the black man also has quite a lot of I don't know that actor's name. He also has a lot. Is it Machalala? It's quite a large name.
Yeah. Very good actor though. He was in House of Cards and a lot of other things. He's pretty cool. Free State of Jones. It was a wicked movie.
Yeah. And he's in the new True Detective as well.
Yeah.
Which is a bit slow, but he's good in it. He's also a filtered character. Like, he's not just an angel. Like, from the advert, he also has problems himself, so he's not depicted as an angel. So.
Right, and I what I think is relevant here is what I do know about it is I know that the guy in real life who Viggo Mortensen is meant to be playing, he went from this to becoming a more actualized, version of himself. He was in, he went to The Godfather. He was in The Godfather. He did some writing. He had a pretty central part in The Sopranos.
As an actor.
Yeah.
The guy plays an actor in.
Yeah. So do you remember? You've seen The Sopranos.
Yeah.
Do you know the head of the Lupatazzi family, Carmine?
It's him, is it?
Yeah. You know the one that chokes and has a stroke and dies.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, him. You know when he says to Tony, "Dons don't wear shorts."
Okay.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
That's the guy. That's
pretty cool.
That's his life story. That's his actual life story.
Fair play.
And they're still friends. They were still friends to his death.
Wow. Well, you're talking about postmodern. The postmodernists can't deal with saying this, that, and that. Can't deal with it beyond these levels or the axioms of conversation like these. But postmodernism as an idea engages with something that's kind of takes away all idea of limit and structure and what's it called, being held to a standard. Takes away standard.
Right.
So the idea that the conversation has to include these limitations. Like if there was a lecturer, he'd go, "We're not talking about that today because they're paying on a course."
Sure.
So the conversation doesn't stoop to that.
Sure.
Because they're not being petty. They're trying
to
give value. But there is no modernist mentor because of the concept of postmodernism.
Right. Yeah. So there isn't the balance. But the
structure of society has to be based around.
But postmodernism, I understand what you're saying, is a thing that's meant to say, well, we don't have to refrain it to one discipline because we can be multidisciplinary in order to get to what we're trying to say or what we're looking into, and I respect that because I'm pretty punishing on postmodernism, but if I look at Barthes, the work of Barthes, he's a Roland Barthes, he's known as a postmodernist writer, and I love
What is he?
He's like a film critic and subtextual essay sort of guy, and I love the sort of stuff he talks about in some of his books. Like
I love Dan Harmon as well as like Rick and Morty.
Right. But Roland Barthes, where he talks about the meanings he sort of extracts from everything in wrestling. So what the light signifies and the characters and the faces they pull and the sort of theatre of it. And not only is this entertaining to read and enriching to read, but you can see where he's coming from, and it speaks to a truth, and that's cool. But I think, like you said, without the modernist sort of teacher or the modernist sort of context, it kind of just it loses all sort of grounding, and that's where I think we're at right now.
Yeah, well said. God, we've covered a lot of topics today.
Yeah, I mean, it's always going to happen like this. I think any notion that it wasn't is just kind of false.
Hey, Morty, come with me. We need to talk about some things. Oh, Rick, I don't know, Rick. Morty, I swear it's going to be really logical. We're going to talk about normal things.
Can't we just stay to films?
Morty, what are you talking about? Films reference everything, Morty. Films about everything. You got to talk about everything and everything.
Christ.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll leave it there because I'm sure you've had quite the earful, and I hope you enjoyed it. This was Marco Camardo and Charles Solly. I'm sure you'll be on again at some point anyway, and there'll be other shit to talk about. Anyway, this is me logging out.